The forest had always been quiet, but this morning felt different. The air was cool, and a thin layer of fog floated above the ground. Birds were silent, and even the wind seemed careful as it moved through the tall trees. A park ranger named Tom walked slowly along the narrow path near the lake. He had worked in this forest for many years, and he knew every sound, every turn, and every smell. That was why he immediately sensed that something was not right. The lake was called Clear Lake by the locals. It was not very big, but it was deep and calm. People believed it had no secrets. Visitors came to enjoy the view, take photos, or sit quietly near the water. Tom had walked around this lake hundreds of times. Yet today, as he reached the edge, he stopped. His eyes fixed on something unusual beneath the surface of the water. At first, he thought it was a shadow. Then he noticed a faint red color under the water. It was not moving, but it was too large to be a rock. Tom bent down and stared closely. The water was clear enough to see deep inside, and what he saw made his heart beat faster. The shape looked straight and solid, not natural at all. Tom stood up and looked around. The forest was empty. No people, no animals. Only silence. He felt a strange mix of curiosity and worry. He had never seen anything like this before. Slowly, he walked along the edge of the lake, keeping his eyes on the red shape. From another angle, it became clearer. It looked like part of a vehicle. That made no sense to him. No road was close to the lake. No reports of accidents had ever been filed here. Tom took out his radio and noted the location. He decided not to touch anything until he was sure. He marked the spot with a small flag and stepped back. As he waited, his mind began to race. How could a vehicle end up in the lake without anyone noticing? The forest had been protected land for decades. Every entry and exit was monitored. There were rules, logs, and records for everything. Still, the red shape remained, quiet and hidden, as if it had been waiting for someone to find it. While waiting for backup, Tom walked a short distance away to clear his thoughts. He looked at the tall trees and remembered stories told by older rangers. Stories about the forest holding secrets. Stories about things hidden long ago. At the time, he had thought they were just tales meant to scare new workers. Now, those stories felt closer to the truth. Soon, another ranger named Ben arrived. Tom explained what he had seen. Ben walked to the edge of the lake and leaned forward. His face changed as soon as he saw the shape. "That is not natural," Ben said quietly. Both men stood there in silence, watching the water. The lake looked peaceful, but something about it now felt heavy. They agreed that this was not something they could handle alone. They called for a recovery team to inspect the lake safely. As the sun climbed higher, more rangers arrived. Equipment was set up carefully to avoid damaging the area. Everyone spoke in low voices, as if afraid to disturb the lake. When the team used special tools to scan beneath the water, the truth became clearer. It was a fire truck. The discovery shocked everyone. A fire truck was large and impossible to miss. Yet no one had ever reported it missing. The scanner showed the full shape resting at the bottom of the lake, covered in mud and plants. It looked old but intact. Questions filled the air. Why was it here? When did it enter the lake? Who put it there? Tom felt a chill run through him. He had seen many strange things in the forest, but this was different. This was not nature playing tricks. This was something planned. The team decided to wait until the next day to pull it out. The lake needed to be secured, and safety checks had to be completed. As the group packed up, Tom stayed behind for a moment. He looked at the water again. The lake reflected the sky like a mirror. It gave no sign of the heavy object beneath it. Tom realized something important then. The forest did not reveal its secrets easily. It waited for the right moment and the right person. As he walked away, Tom felt certain of one thing. This discovery was only the beginning. Whatever was hidden inside that fire truck would change how people saw this forest forever. The next morning arrived with thick clouds covering the sky. The forest looked darker than usual, as if it sensed what was about to happen. Tom reached the lake early, long before most of the team arrived. He stood quietly near the water, holding a warm cup of coffee, watching the surface remain calm. It was hard to believe that something so large rested beneath it. Soon, trucks arrived one by one. Rangers, safety workers, and recovery experts stepped out and began setting up equipment. Ropes, hooks, and lifting tools were placed carefully on the ground. Everyone moved with focus and care. This was not a normal task. A fire truck was heavy, and pulling it out without damage was difficult. Ben joined Tom near the water. Neither of them spoke at first. Both men were lost in thought. "If this truck has been here for years," Ben said softly, "it means someone wanted it hidden." Tom nodded. There were no skid marks, no broken trees, no signs of panic. Everything about the discovery felt planned. The team leader explained the process clearly. First, divers would secure the truck with strong cables. Then a crane would slowly lift it out. The lake would be protected, and nothing would be rushed. Safety came first. When the divers entered the water, the lake finally seemed to react. Small waves formed, and the surface rippled. Tom watched closely as bubbles rose. Minutes passed slowly. Every sound felt loud in the quiet forest. One diver came back up and reported something strange. The truck doors were closed and locked. There was no damage to the body. It looked placed, not crashed. That information spread quickly among the group. The mystery grew heavier. The cables were attached, and the crane moved into position. The metal arm rose slowly, pulling against the weight beneath the water. At first, nothing happened. Then, the lake gave up its secret. The top of the fire truck broke the surface. Water poured off its sides like rain. Plants and mud clung to it, showing how long it had rested below. Everyone stepped back as the crane lifted it higher. Tom felt his chest tighten. Seeing the truck made the situation real. It was red, faded, and old. The paint was chipped, but the shape was clear. This was no small vehicle. It was a full fire truck. As it was placed gently on the shore, silence fell over the group. No one cheered. No one spoke. The forest seemed to hold its breath. The truck stood there like a visitor from another time. Rust marked its edges, but the structure was strong. The tires were flat, yet still attached. The windows were cloudy but not broken. Ben walked slowly around it, reading faded markings on the side. He recognized the symbol. It belonged to a fire station that had closed many years ago. That station shut down before this park was even formed, Ben said. This raised even more questions. Why bring the truck here? Why hide it? Before opening anything, the team inspected the outside carefully. They took photos, recorded details, and checked for safety risks. Everything was done by the book. Still, Tom noticed something odd. There were no signs of water inside the cabin. The seals looked strong. Finally, the team leader gave permission to open the doors. Tom stood close as one of the workers unlocked the driver door. It opened with a slow creak. The smell inside was old but not rotten. The seats were dusty but dry. Papers lay neatly on the dashboard. This alone was strange. Water should have ruined everything. The back of the truck was next. When the rear doors were opened, the air seemed to change. Inside were rows of wooden boxes, stacked carefully from floor to ceiling. Each box was sealed and labeled by hand. Nothing was broken. Nothing was scattered. Everyone stared in disbelief. This was not storage forgotten by time. This was storage made with purpose. Tom stepped closer and read one label. It had a date written decades ago. Another box listed a location name from the forest. Why would someone hide boxes like this in a fire truck, in a lake? Ben asked. No one answered. The forest stayed silent. The team decided not to open the boxes yet. This discovery needed proper handling. The truck and its contents were secured and covered. Guards were placed nearby. Word of the discovery was kept limited to avoid attention. As the day went on, officials arrived to review the situation. Old records were checked. Files were opened. Still, no report mentioned a missing fire truck. It was as if the vehicle had been erased from history. Tom felt uneasy. Someone had worked very hard to hide this. As evening approached, the forest grew quiet again. The truck rested on land, but the lake looked unchanged. It was as calm as ever, hiding no signs of what it had given up. Tom stayed behind once more, standing between the truck and the water. He felt that the forest was watching him, testing him. Whatever was inside those boxes carried weight, not just physical but historical. This discovery was no accident. And Tom knew that when the boxes were finally opened, the truth would reshape everything they believed about the forest and its past. Morning light filtered through the trees as the secured area came back to life. Guards had stayed alert all night, and nothing had been disturbed. The fire truck stood quietly on the shore, covered but not forgotten. Tom arrived early again, his mind filled with questions that had no answers yet. Today was the day the boxes would be opened. A small group was chosen to be present. Only those directly involved were allowed near the truck. The goal was to handle everything carefully and respectfully. Each step was recorded. Every box mattered. The cover was removed, and the back doors of the truck were opened once more. The wooden boxes sat exactly as before. They looked simple, yet they carried a heavy feeling. Tom reached out and touched one gently. The wood felt dry and strong. It had been protected well. The team leader selected the first box and placed it on a table. The seal was examined, then slowly opened. Everyone leaned in. Inside were old tools wrapped in cloth. Each tool was clean and labeled. There were axes, measuring tools, and metal parts used long ago to mark land. These were not random items. They belonged to people who worked closely with the forest. Tom recognized some of them from old training manuals. These tools were used by early forest guards, long before modern systems existed. The second box held rolled papers tied with string. When they were unwrapped, hand-drawn maps appeared. They showed the forest as it was many years ago. Paths, water sources, and hidden clearings were marked carefully. Some areas were circled with notes written in neat handwriting. Ben studied the maps closely. "These are not just maps," he said. "These are plans." The third box contained journals. Thick books filled with writing from cover to cover. The pages were yellowed but clear. The first journal was opened carefully. It told the story of a small group of people assigned to protect the forest during a difficult time. Resources were limited. Communication was slow. The forest faced threats from careless use and rapid change. These people took it upon themselves to guard the land. They wrote about watching over the trees, water, and animals. They believed the forest was alive in its own way. They wrote about responsibility, patience, and long nights spent listening to the sounds of nature. As more journals were opened, a pattern formed. The group knew that changes were coming. They feared that their work would be forgotten. So they decided to preserve their records. The fire truck was chosen because it was strong, large, and weather-resistant. It had served its purpose well and was no longer needed. Instead of letting it decay, they turned it into a moving vault. One journal explained the plan clearly. They drove the truck deep into the forest at night, using old paths that no longer exist. They sealed the contents inside and carefully guided the truck into the lake. The lake was chosen because it was deep and quiet. Few people came near it. They believed someone in the future would find it when the time was right. The next boxes contained photographs. Black and white images showed people standing among tall trees. They wore simple uniforms and looked serious but proud. Some photos showed the forest before it became a protected park. Others showed early signs warning visitors to respect the land. Tom felt a strong connection to the people in the photos. Their faces showed dedication. They looked like people who cared deeply about their work. One photo caught Tom's attention. It showed the fire truck being prepared near the lake. The date on the back matched the journal entry. The truck looked almost new then, bright and clean. This made Tom pause. These people had planned everything with care. They had trusted the future to be kind. More boxes were opened. Some held letters written to future forest guards. The letters spoke about values rather than rules. Protect the land. Listen before acting. Leave no mark where none is needed. Ben read one letter aloud. His voice was steady, but his eyes showed emotion. It felt like a message meant for them, not just anyone. The final box contained a single book. It was thicker than the others. Inside was a record of decisions, meetings, and promises. At the end of the book was a list of names. Tom scanned the names slowly. These were not famous people. They were ordinary workers who chose to do something meaningful. The room was quiet when the last box was closed. No one rushed to speak. The discovery had changed the meaning of the fire truck. It was no longer a mystery object. It was a bridge between past and present. The team leader finally broke the silence. These items belong to the history of this land, he said. They trusted us to find them. Tom felt a sense of responsibility settle over him. The forest was not just a place he worked in. It was a story still being told. Outside, the lake reflected the sky as it always had. It kept its calm, as if satisfied. The forest had shared its secret, not with noise or force, but with patience. Tom knew this was not the end. What they had learned would shape how the forest was protected in the future. The past had reached out, and the present had listened. The days that followed were filled with careful work. The boxes from the fire truck were moved to a secure building near the forest office. Each item was cleaned, recorded, and studied. Experts arrived to help understand the old tools, maps, and writings. The forest, which had always been quiet, now felt alive with purpose. Tom spent most of his time reading the journals. Each page revealed more about the group who once protected the land. They were not powerful people. They were ordinary workers who believed that the forest deserved care and respect. They had faced many challenges, yet they never gave up. One journal described a time when large changes threatened the forest. Roads were planned. Trees were marked. Water sources were at risk. The group worked day and night to guide decisions in a better direction. They knew they could not stop all change, but they could guide it wisely. Tom shared these stories with other rangers. Meetings were held to discuss what the past could teach them. The old maps showed paths that were now forgotten. Some areas marked as sensitive matched places that still felt fragile today. This discovery helped explain many things. Certain rules passed down through generations of rangers suddenly made sense. They were not random. They were lessons carried quietly from those who came before. Ben focused on the letters written to future forest guards. Each letter spoke with care and hope. The writers did not ask for praise. They only asked that the land be treated kindly. One letter spoke about balance. It said that protecting the forest did not mean keeping people away forever. It meant teaching them how to enter with respect. This idea stayed with Tom. He realized that protection was not about walls or signs alone. It was about understanding. As word of the discovery spread carefully, leaders from nearby towns became interested. They visited the site and listened to the story. Many were surprised. They had lived near the forest all their lives without knowing its deeper history. Plans were made to create a small exhibit. The goal was not to impress, but to educate. The fire truck would not be shown fully, but its story would be shared through photos and writing. The boxes and their contents would be displayed carefully. Tom helped design the exhibit. He wanted visitors to feel the same respect he felt when reading the journals. He chose simple words and clear explanations. This story did not need drama. Its power came from honesty. While preparing the exhibit, Tom often walked by the lake. He thought about the night when the truck was lowered into the water. The people who did it must have felt hope mixed with sadness. They trusted time and patience. The lake remained calm, holding no trace of its secret. Tom felt grateful to it, in a quiet way. One afternoon, a young ranger asked Tom why the group chose to hide the truck instead of leaving the items somewhere easier to find. Tom thought for a moment before answering. They wanted to protect the story until someone was ready to listen, he said. That answer stayed with him. The forest management team decided to update some policies based on the old maps and notes. Certain areas would receive extra care. Paths would be redirected. Education programs would be improved. The past was not just remembered. It was used. As weeks passed, the exhibit opened quietly. Visitors read the journals and looked at the photos with curiosity and respect. Many left thoughtful comments. Some said they would walk the forest differently now. Slower. More aware. Tom stood near the entrance one day and watched people read. He saw understanding grow on their faces. This made him proud, not of himself, but of the people who had trusted the future. The fire truck was eventually moved to a secure storage site. It had completed its final task. It had carried a message across time. On a calm evening, Tom returned to the lake one last time before the exhibit closed for the day. The sun reflected on the water, turning it gold. The forest felt peaceful. Tom understood something then. The forest was not silent. It spoke through actions, choices, and care passed from one generation to the next. The discovery had not shocked the world with noise. It had changed it quietly. And sometimes, that kind of change lasts the longest. Months passed, and the forest slowly returned to its usual quiet rhythm. The excitement around the discovery settled, but its impact remained strong. The story of the hidden fire truck and the people behind it became part of the forest's identity. It was no longer just a protected area on a map. It was a place with a living history. Tom continued his daily patrols, but his walks felt different now. Every tree, every path, and every sound seemed meaningful. He felt connected not only to the land but also to those who had walked it long before him. Their choices had shaped the present, and now his choices would shape the future. The exhibit became a steady place of learning. Schools brought students. Families visited on weekends. Guides explained the story in simple words, focusing on care, patience, and responsibility. Children listened closely, asking thoughtful questions. Some said they wanted to become rangers one day. Ben helped lead training sessions for new rangers. He used the journals as teaching tools. He explained that rules were not just written orders. They were lessons learned through experience. The old group had faced challenges, and their wisdom still mattered. One day, a new ranger named Sam joined the team. He was young and eager to learn. Tom was assigned to guide him. As they walked near the lake, Sam asked about the fire truck. Tom told the story calmly, from the first red shape under the water to the final letter in the last box. Sam listened carefully, his eyes wide with respect. They trusted someone like us to find it, Sam said. Yes, Tom replied. And now it is our turn to be worthy of that trust. The forest management team introduced a new program inspired by the discovery. It focused on listening to the land before making decisions. Rangers spent more time observing patterns in nature. They shared notes, just like the group from the past had done. Small changes made a big difference. Trails were adjusted to protect sensitive areas. Signs encouraged visitors to slow down and notice details. The forest responded well. Plants grew stronger. Wildlife returned to quieter zones. One evening, Tom sat near the lake as the sun lowered behind the trees. The water reflected the sky in soft colors. He remembered the day the truck was pulled out. That moment had felt heavy and uncertain. Now, it felt like a gift. He thought about the people who had sealed the boxes and guided the truck into the lake. They had not known who would find it or when. They only believed that someone would care. That belief had been correct. A letter from the exhibit caught Tom's attention later that week. It was written by a visitor. The note said that learning the story had changed how the writer viewed nature. They now felt responsible, not just as a visitor, but as a caretaker. Tom smiled. That was exactly what the journals had hoped for. As time moved on, the fire truck became less talked about, but never forgotten. It lived on through lessons, policies, and quiet respect. The forest did not need constant attention to its story. It only needed people who remembered it. On the anniversary of the discovery, the rangers gathered near the lake. There was no ceremony, no speeches. Just a moment of silence. The wind moved through the trees, and birds called from a distance. Tom felt peace. The forest had shared its secret, not to shock or surprise, but to guide. It had waited patiently, trusting that someone would listen. As the group walked away, the lake returned to its calm state. It held no truck now, but it held something greater. It held a promise. A promise that the forest would be protected with care, wisdom, and respect. A promise passed quietly from one generation to the next, just as it was meant to be.